Oh, that's funny.
You guys are good.
All right. So, man, we're here with Werner. Hey, guys, if you're listening to the podcast, if they're hearing this, they're obviously listening to the podcast, right? Right. If you're enjoying this podcast or you just want to support the podcast, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, turn on the notifications. Thank you for the support. This podcast is brought to you by our friend and realtor, Naomi Townsend with Keller Williams Property Teams. She'll help you in every step of the way, whether you're buying or selling a home, commercial property, mobile home, or even a vacant lot. In the last few years, she's helped hundreds of families buy their dream homes in the Central Valley, Bay Area, Monterey, and even the Sacramento area. Check her Zillow profile where she has a perfect 5-star ranking. She is also bilingual in Spanish. In 2021, she was in the national top 2 in her brokerage. Please, guys, check out her Instagram, Sold by Naomi, or reach out to her at 408-623-1414. All the links are in the bio. Remember, guys, support those who support us. This podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sorensen's Ace Hardware, located at 400 Us. For all your hardware and some help for all your hardware needs for all of our people out in the Modesto area. Please support those who support us. Thank you.
You gotta get uncomfortable, get comfort.
And some help. It ain't on the way. It's already waiting for you.
This little pill right here could take over your life. And I found that out the hard way. Mission statement of this podcast highlights stories of people that I've met in my journey in recovery. Werner F. It took me a while to learn how to say your name because I thought it was Warner. It's Werner.
Werner.
Yeah.
Werner.
Anyways.
Yeah.
So I met Werner doing service where we hang out, right? And the first time I was there, I was filling in for somebody. I was very early in recovery. And I'd see these people up there, and I'd be, man, these guys got their shit together, right? And so you look at people, and I come up with my own assumption, right? And then I've seen Werner, and I've seen what he does, and he's a selfless servant to the program that saved our lives, right? And so when I got the opportunity to ask him to do this, I was ecstatic because I haven't heard Werner's story, right? And so this is the selfish part of the podcast. I get to sit back and not only get to know you better, but learn about you, right?
You get to hear it all.
I get to hear it all.
Right.
So, man, first of all, thank you for allowing us into your home, your beautiful home.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm proud of our house. I think my wife has done a great job with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's going on with you, Werner?
What's going on with me? I'm nervous.
Okay.
But I'm Werner, and I'm an addict, as you know. And, I just had knee surgery, and it hurts, and it doesn't hurt. So I'm nervous about that. And, other than that, there's not much going on.
Right.
Yeah. State disability, everything is fine. We're paying our bills. Everything is good.
Life's good.
Yeah, life is really good. But there was a time that it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, what's your clean date, Werner?
July 23rd, 2004. I had to think about it because my son's birthday is July 22nd, and that was when he turned 21. That was in that same month of 2004. I had quit using and stopped using crank and stopped drinking, but then he turned 21 and we went to Chevy's when it was over here in Modesto, and I had drank with him for his 21st birthday. And then the following Monday, the 28th or whatever, is when I went into the treatment center. And then they said, well, when's your clean date? And I said, I don't know. I said, well, the last time, because, I was going with the last time that I used what I used, which was crank and pot, okay? And they were like, oh, well, alcohol. And I'm like, okay, well, I was drinking last, Wednesday. Okay, well, then Thursday, the day after, is your clean date. So, okay, that's fine. I don't care. Right. I didn't, at that time, I was very resistant to going. I know that's surprising, right?
Right.
But I wanted to know why I continued to revert back to using. What was it in my life that I couldn't take care of?
Right.
And it was the pain in my head. Okay. When I did not use, the pain of my life was that I stored inside of my head was just overbearing. And, I could go for a long time and then I'd have a beer. And then a couple of beers. And then I'd hunt down some pot. I'd look for a joint. And after that, I'd look for some crank. And the game was on and running.
Right.
And why do I keep doing that? And, but I'd hit a bottom, but it was a pretty high bottom. I'd never been arrested, never been questioned, just been, I've been followed. I've been followed, towards the end, there was a guy, I had my own business towards the end, and I had a tool truck. I drove around and sold tools to people, and I was selling more crank at the time. And I come into Oakdale and I make a turn, and I see this guy making a U-turn in front of me, and we make eye contact as he goes by. And okay, cool, but he just looked like a putz. And so I went about my day, and that was in the morning, probably about 9:30 or 10. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm out in Waterford, okay, and I'm turning in. I'm 7 miles out of Waterford, okay, going to the rock factory to sell some tools. And I turned into the driveway, and there's that same guy in a different car. And, hey, I saw you this morning. Whew, he was gone. And that's when I started picking up that, okay, there's something going on here.
Right.
Yeah. And, yeah, so that was being followed.
Well, what a get down. You got a traveling, you're traveling selling tools, and people that like to use tools like to use crank too.
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, the tool truck can suck in anything you want, from stolen credit cards, stolen cars, stolen car parts, drugs, anything you want to let in.
Right.
And being the addict that I am, once I started using, when I had the business, I made an $8,000 deal on the phone. I'm on the phone in the morning. I send in this guy's credit app. Okay, it's out in Oakdale, and got a check in the morning. So I call. I'm on my way to Oakdale, and I call, and they said he's approved for $8,800. Yeah, finally, I got somebody approved. So I call the guy and say, hey, do you want that toolbox? He says, yeah, order it. So I order the toolbox, and the deal's going, and I'm thinking, man, I got to celebrate a little bit here, okay? I'm 6 months into this, and I go to a stop, and a guy gets on the phone, and back then he had cordless work phones. He's on the phone, and he's looking around in the truck, and he tells the guy, and he says, well, bring candy. Well, I had lollipops, I had red vines, I had candy.
Right.
And I'm an addict, I know. So when he hung up, I said, so what kind of candy is he bringing? I said, I got a great green bud guy. I don't really care for Coke, but man, I could sure use a bag of crank. Oh, no, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I don't know what you're talking. Dude, give it up. Calls me back later on, he's got a $20 bag for me. I made that $20 bag last all week long until I saw him again on Tuesday. And then I got a $20 bag again, and that lasted till Wednesday.
I can see where you're going here.
Okay? So I call him back, and I got a $40 bag. And that lasted through the weekend. And right away, Monday, I'm calling him. And hey, and I get some more. And by the time I met somebody that was making it, I was doing an eighth a week, okay? And smoking pot and cranking and just, running wild and running in circles. Running in circles.
Right, and that's where it takes us. But let's go back a little bit, because you were talking about the pain in your head that kept you going.
Before you answer that, can I turn off that fan?
Yes. Which fan?
That one right here.
The white one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the pain that kept you going, right? And so, I don't know how far you want to go back, but
I'll tell you whatever you want to know.
Well, tell me what's important, right? So let's go back. What does early childhood and everything look like for Werner?
For me, obviously I'm short, and I was a fat kid, and I'm heavy now, but I was a fat kid, so I got made fun of, and I am the youngest of 4. There's 8, 9, and 12 years difference. And my house was a typical dysfunctional house. My mom and dad were together. You know, he was an old World War II vet. My mom is an old gangster Italian family. You know, I mean, what a combination, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like trauma in the making.
Yeah. And, but she was all about taking care of my dad, and my dad was just mean. It was just his nature. You know, I mean, kids are made to be seen and not heard.
Right.
Okay. And my siblings, my sister came of age to get a car, and because my dad didn't want her to leave, he got her a dog. Okay. So my sister was mad and said, you know, the hell with this shit. And she went out and got her license, got a job, and stayed away from the house as much as she could. My poor sister, when I was born, I was dropped in her lap because she was 12. And my mom went to work. My dad went to work. My mom went to work. So I was dropped in her lap. So she had to take care of me. She had to take care of the other 2. You know. So once she was old enough to go, she did.
Right.
And my other brother, Ron, was close too. He lied about his age and got himself a job at a gas station in Oakland, and he was gone. And so then it was me and the other one, Rick, and for a minute, and finally he was old enough to get a job, and he was gone. So there I was alone. All in this time, I got my grandfather, who's a child molester, okay, named after him. I'm the third, okay, him, my dad, and me. And you know, but my dad, when I say kids are made to be seen and not heard, we would watch the news when we ate dinner, 6 o'clock. We ate dinner, 6 o'clock, bam, okay? And if I talked or did something that pissed him off, we sat like this. I'd get backhanded, and it would be the kind of backhands that, you know, throw you back in the chair. So you don't talk. I didn't talk. We watched Walter Cronkite. So that was the beginning of shit, okay? Them abandoning me, but I didn't know what that was at the time. Right. I didn't know that feeling or how to describe that feeling then. That was something. But they still lived there. And in the 5th grade, well, from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade, my parents sent me to live with my grandparents in the summer. They lived up in Laytonville, up country, we called it. And Nana had cut trees and skinned them and lashed them together and built a whole camp. So the first 3-day weekend of the year, they would dig out mattresses out of this shed that they had and set up camp. And family would come. You know, my family would come, my dad's 2 sisters and their family would come. Nana's family would come because that was their second marriage. My grandfather married this woman, and she had this property. And her family would come, and we'd all intermingle, and it was great times. But I got manipulated, you know, to go, instead of staying here down in camp, to come up here to the house with him, which turned into...
Like a camp of nightmares.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, which turned into the nightmares. What I did learn by being in recovery, at the end of the summer, he gave me money, and I was able to purchase a mini bike when I got home. Okay, big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so then where's your head go? You know, you're going into the 4th grade, you got this, and you've experienced these feelings and other stuff, and experienced a lot of meanness. Okay, and you're going into the 4th grade, and you got a mini bike, and you're the cool kid on the street, and everybody wants to go with you and ride, and you're doing that stuff. And then all of a sudden, it's summertime, and it's time to go back up country. And the first thought in your head is, I'm going to get some money.
Right.
So what I've learned is that through the step work, through the letter writing, you become a willing participant. Unwilling, but a willing. Okay, so that went on the summer of the 6th grade, going into the 7th grade. There was a guy across the street that was older than me, and we were talking about it. And the next day, he came. He'd gone to school, and I was in the 6th grade, and he was in the 7th grade. And he went to school and looked it up in the library, and said, "That's not right. You and your grandfather are like that. That's not right. You shouldn't be doing that." And that was just like, okay. Now I understand kind of the fight that him and my dad and my mom had one time when my dad was talking about how his dad was a molester because he got his sister, okay? But his dad was really mean, and they lived in Chicago. My dad was born in Joliet, and then they moved to Chicago. My grandfather was a welder. And so all of that turmoil there, okay? And in the 5th grade, I started stealing my dad's cigarettes, Lucky Strikes. Okay, that's where a lot of it started. Yeah. In the process, we have gone back to Chicago to cousins' weddings, and I was the guy that went around while people were dancing. I went around to every table and drank everything that they had sitting there. So I went from beer, whiskey, vodka, wine, champagne. Okay, I went down the whole table, and that was a start also of my addictive process, and got really sick. My cousins saved me, the ones that lived back there, they saved me. And the following year I did it again at the next one's wedding, and they saved me again. And so I see that now where I had a choice then. And I could see the choice, but I didn't make the choice. I went the wrong way. I went the other way because I didn't want to think about Pop. I didn't want to think about if I told my dad, if I said something to my mom and dad, my dad would probably drive up country and kill him. And then my dad would be gone. So I didn't want to say that, even though I couldn't stand him because he was mean. Okay? And so that was, that progressed up through the 6th grade, got into the 7th grade, and girls. Okay? Where I grew up is streets, main pathways, divided school zones. And people from across the main pathway came over to our grammar school. Okay? And then when we got out of that grammar school, and it was time for 7th and 8th grade, junior high, I went this way, and half of us went this way, and the other half went this way over to another one, okay? So then we got over to here to this one, and there's a whole new set of girls. Alcohol, baby. Yeah. So I figured out that I could steal my brother's Airline bottles that we had a family member, she was a stewardess, and she'd bring him bottles of booze, and I could steal those bottles and I could fill them up with alcohol out of my mom and dad's cabinet. And they wouldn't notice because they didn't use alcohol until it was pinochle time. When it was their turn to have the pinochle group, then they would get the alcohol out and they'd make what they called highballs. Yeah. Whatever they are, Yeah.
That could be whatever.
It could be whatever. Right. And sorry.
No, you're good.
And so 7th and 8th grade was smoking cigarettes, smoking pot, and drinking. And then into the 9th grade I went, and I got to see, because on this other side of the road, the main road, that where some of these people went over, that lived over here, that went to that junior high. Well, there was another 4 grammar schools over there on that side that all went to that junior high, plus the parochial school. And we all ended up at a high school together. And I was like, whoa. So I quit everything. I was going to play football. And here I am, a short, fat guy that could hardly run around the track in junior high, okay? And I'm going to go play football. And I knew I hated it, okay? Whenever I got in trouble at home on the weekends and my dad was home, I'd have to sit at the bottom, at the edge of the couch on the floor, and he'd flick my ear, or he'd grab me by the neck and squeeze, but football was on.
So another way to please.
Football was on.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to go play football. I knew nothing about it. I hated it. I was embarrassed. You know, plays were like, I ran the wrong way all the time. I had a guy that I finally figured it out a little bit, and this guy that I grew up with came around the corner and just smacked me, and it wasn't supposed to be that type of a thing with interplay. So the next play, we did it again. When he came around the corner, I fucking blasted him. And he's like, hey, what the hell? I said, no, you what the hell? You know, I did get to play because, you know, back then that was frosh soft or whatever they called it. And everybody played because there was a fifth quarter. My dad came to one game. My mom never came to any. Okay. That summer, hanging out at the local pizza parlor where my brother Rick was working, the boss, the old guy Frank, was slicing stuff that goes on the pizzas. And I'm standing at the counter talking, and he's like, what are you doing? Said, talking to you guys, nothing. He said, well, put your bicycle in the back and come on and go grab an apron around the corner and come here. So I do all that, and I come over there, and he says, this is how you do this machine. And it was a slicer. And I'm standing in front of a big 4-foot by 6-foot picture window. My brother's on the left of me, and we're watching traffic go by, and I'm slicing. And I got a job. Next thing I know, I got a job. You know, and he's paying me like $1 an hour. I had worked in the past also for my other brother, Ron, in gas stations. And he used to pick me up at 5 in the morning and drop me off at 7 at night for $1 an hour. Yeah, that was a mess. But that was fun work. I enjoyed that. Got to learn how to drive a tow truck. You know, I mean, what was I? 8th, 9th grade, and I'm driving a tow truck around a parking lot and so driving cars into the shop, you know, and yeah.
So you grew up fast.
Yes.
And you had to learn on your own because you didn't have much guidance, it sounded like. And so,
go do this.
Well, in the crazy part about it is like you sitting here talking about it, me listening, I could hear how unhealthy and how crazy that is, right? But being involved in this is just normal.
Yes.
Right?
It was normal. It was yeah. And, you know, I'd got several gas station jobs in between after that because he got us fired, you know, because he did something and pissed off the owner, and he got us fired, and we went down and we started working at a place in Oakland on Hagenberger, a guy that he used to work for years ago. And I continued to work for him on the weekends. I would ride my bicycle down, and then that was my freshman year. And then the job with the pizza parlor came, so I didn't work for the gas station guy anymore. I worked at the pizza parlor. They said something about getting a work permit, and I blew that off. I looked into it, and then I found out it said that you can only work 20 hours a week. So I just kind of rolled it away. Right. I manipulated that away. I ended up working Tuesday through Saturday, 3:30 to 11.
So you gained a work ethic, right?
I learned how to work. Yes.
Right.
Yes. They both of my brothers taught me how to work. You know, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean.
Right.
Go do something. Stay busy. Don't stand around. Go do something. And I learned that. And I've always been like that. And you know, the pizza parlor, I was. It all went along. You know, I met a girl working at the pizza parlor, fell in love with her, got out of high school, and she said something. She was a senior and I was a junior. And she started talking about getting married, and that kind of freaked me out. So we broke up, and that was kind of a big deal. Because, you know, I didn't find crank until I got out of high school. My senior year, a guy, Lenny, turned me on to some beans, cross tops, was what we call little white pills. Okay,
I've heard about them.
Little white pills, and it had a line going each way through the middle. Called them cross tops or beans, and people would get them out of pharmacies. They were diet pills, and whoa, that was cool. Right. I liked that. You know, it was long. You know, I quit everything to play football when I was a freshman. towards the end of my sophomore year, I started picking up smoking a little bit. Into my junior year, one of the other guys that I worked with at the pizza parlor was like getting paper cups and hitting the tap when my brother and the other boss would go in the back and count receipts and count money. And I'm in it. Yeah, I'm on. I'm in.
When we see it as like manipulating behavior now, but like as a youth, that's kind of like just the natural progression, experimenting, figuring things out.
Right.
And so, like, where does that take you to the point to where it's like, okay, now, even back then, I'm sure, like, once it started progressing into deeper addiction, you still didn't realize what was going on.
No, I didn't realize what was going on, but boy, it sure did progress.
Yeah.
It progressed to, this pizza parlor was here on a main drive in San Leandro. I grew up in San Leandro. It's over there by Oakland and Hayward, okay? And little bedroom community, okay? And light industrial. And this pizza parlor was here, and across the street was a 7-Eleven and a bar over here. And you could sneak into the backside of the bar when the back door was open, and you could lift some warm beers. You could distract the person at the 7-Eleven, and you could steal some beer. You could go down to, you could go to Oakland, to Clem Daniels liquor store, and you could get away with buying alcohol. There was an old guy over farther down in a shopping market in a liquor store that every now and then you could get something out of him, you know. Sometimes he'd sell it to you, sometimes he wouldn't. And but the progression was there.
Right.
You know, yeah. I went from hiding in trunks going to the drive-in movie with a 12-pack of Coors and drinking all of that until I was laying on the ground puking.
Right.
Okay, that's where it went, you know. But I didn't notice that. I did what everybody else was doing because I was cool.
Right.
I was cool. I went with the crowd. I followed, and so you know that progresses all through high school. And once I'm a senior, and we're down to like the last week, and this guy Lenny turns me onto a couple of those beans, and they were great. And I tried to get more and I couldn't. And then I asked around and I couldn't get them. And I was working, I'd gone to work in a machine shop with this guy, and we were building non-lube air compressors that were getting sent to the Alaska pipeline, to control valves, because they were dry, okay? So it had no water and no oil. The air that came out was dry. I got something in my eye. And went to the eye doctor, and he gave me time off from that job. But I still went and worked at the pizza parlor. And I was back here washing dishes one night, and the owner of the machine shop comes in, and he sees me, and he's like, just like a totally disgusted look on his face. And the next day I go see him, and he says, I don't need you anymore. You know, gave me this big old spiel about how it wasn't right and this and that. I said, okay, fine. Had a guy that we grew up with who, when we were sophomores, his parents decided to up and move back to Texas. Packed him and his brother up, and off to Texas they went, up in the Fort Worth area. And when that happened with the machine shop, I called this guy Scott, and I went to Texas. I filed for unemployment. I didn't have to be back to the unemployment office for a month. So I flew to Texas, saw Scott, met tons of women, drank till we couldn't drink anymore, met tons of women, had a great time. It was time to come home to go report at unemployment. I did that, and at the time back then, you went into an unemployment office and you talked to a person.
Yeah, you had to show face.
You had to show face, right. And she was rude. I didn't like her. And I told her that. I said, you know, you're really rude. I don't like you. I am never coming back here again. I'm going to get a job. And she said, okay, fine. So I went and got a job. I went back to the guy that, the gas station guy that I worked for in between a little bit when I was younger out in Oakland. He had a gas station in Castro Valley. And so I went there and worked for him. And got a job pumping gas on graveyard shift. Okay? And smoking and drinking a little bit. But I stayed busy.
Yeah.
Because he was one of the guys that, with my brother Ron, that was like, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. So I was bored, so I cleaned that whole state. I cleaned the parking lot, I cleaned the pumps, I cleaned the bath, I cleaned everything. You know, and it was a big station, and 2 weeks into the job, 3 weeks into the job, a bunch of guys on bikes come in. And they're patched, okay, they're Hell's Angels. They come in, and nasty looking guys, a couple of them. And it's like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. And because back then, you could walk up to a pump, you flip the lever, and you started pumping gas.
Yeah.
Okay? And then you put the lever down, you put it back in, and you paid. So I finally built up, this guy there was like 8 pumps, and they're all over. So I went to the first guy that finished and built up enough nerve to talk to him and said, and he says, what do you want, money? I said, well, yeah, kind of, who's going to pay? And he turns around to the end of the line and he points to this younger guy. And he says, he's going to pay for everybody. So add it all up and tell him how much. And then as they're getting gas, they're starting to drive away. Okay, so I go back to this guy, and he looks at me and he's like, and he was probably 6'3", big guy, okay, but my age.
Yeah.
It was my age. You could tell. I could tell. He was like fresh out of high school too, you know, but a big guy. And he says, huh? And I said, well, that guy that was going across the street and up the hill. I said, he said, you're paying for everybody. Oh, okay. And he pulled out a wad of $100 bills like I'd never seen before. And he paid me, and him and I got to talking, and he is the one that introduced me to crank. And he used to come by with sandwich baggies filled, and I don't know if you are old enough to know about McDonald's straws, how they used to be really big, really fat, big brown, okay? And he'd stuff that in there, and he said, try this. I said, well, what's that? And he said, you'll like it. Don't worry. You'll be up all night. You'll get everything done.
That place is real clean. Huh?
Blew the top of my head off, man. Let me tell you, I'd never thought of anything after that about my brothers, about my sister, about my mom and dad. All I thought about was losing weight, working out, and finding women.
Right.
Because I was single, and I was in an area where there was 2 high schools in between of girls that I didn't know. Because, you know, all the girls that I grew up with, oh, you're like going out with my brother, you know, da, da.
Yeah. When you have this new love of your life, right, this crank that you've been introduced to, and the effect that drugs sometimes have on people is all those inhibitions go away. Right? And this is the key to that. And you're not thinking about all this other stuff.
Correct.
And so that was probably the pivot point where your addiction took off. Huh?
Right. Well, I never, you know, like I told you about being a kid earlier, is I never had problems talking to people. Right. I could talk to you, okay? I could say, hey, how you doing? You know, I could do that. And I was the guy that, you know, when you came into the gas station, hi, how are you today? Fill it up. You know, and I washed all your windows and I did all that, you know, and we talked.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I was the guy that talked. And then I found that, and then I really talked. And then I started losing weight. And then I started working, then he liked the job that I was doing at night. So he moved me to the day shift, and he put somebody else at night. And I started working the day shift. And one day I walked by, I was on my way home, and I walked by, and there's a car apart, front brakes were torn apart, and I said, hey, you want me to put this back together? Because they were running behind, and the manager of the station at the time kind of looked over and was like, you know how to do that? And I said, well, yeah, we did this in high school. Because that's what I took in high school, was auto shop, metal shop, and wood shop. I was the one that got high and went to lecture and argued with the history teacher, why do we need this shit? What am I ever going to use this for? Okay? I want to go work on cars. What is this going to help me with? Well, maybe you ought to go down to the dean's office. Okay, fine. You know, so, yeah. But, you know, there was a stage that I passed through. And he says, yeah, go ahead. But come and get me at each step. So, you know, I mean, back then you packed wheel bearings by hand. You know, you put grease in your palm and you stuffed it until the grease came out. Put it all together. I got everything together step by step. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So then I got to start working on things a little bit, and it just came to me. Right. I could work on cars. It came to me. It was like nothing. It was like easy. And found a career. And I found girls. You know, I had goals with the girls.
Right.
I had goals, and I achieved those goals. And I had met a girl that lived in Alameda, and we were hanging out one night, and she said something about love. And I was like, I'm out of here. And I got on my motorcycle and took off. And she came and found me a couple of days later and was like, you know, you're just going to do this to somebody else. And so I wasn't going out with anybody then. You know, I just stopped doing that. And well, I'm at work one day, and I had met this girl in Castro Valley, this girl Lori, and she came in with this other girl in a Volkswagen Beetle, and she's beautiful. I was like, whoa. And there was another guy that I had hired that was a year younger than me, and I went this way to the car, and he was coming this way, and I beat him. I got there first, okay? And I kept her there for 35 minutes, okay? Talking to her and talking to Lori, and because I knew Lori, so it was my end to talk, easier to talk with her, because she's beautiful. Just knocked my socks off, okay? Just like, whoa. And I had seen her before, because she lived around the corner from someone that I was going out with. And I would see her, but I never stopped to talk. And there was a couple of times she'd be standing on the porch, and I'd slow down and look at her, and just like, and then she'd look at me and she'd be like, what? She'd give me that. Like, what? You know? And I'd drive away. And so finally she came in, and now I got her, talking to her. And this other girl had broke up with me, so it all kind of fell together. And one night, I didn't get her phone number, because, you know, back then we didn't have cell phones.
Yeah.
So you got to call somebody's house, okay? And
Took a little more nerve.
you got to talk to mom or dad,
Yeah.
usually, okay? Or somebody else, you know, another sibling or something, you know. But I called, and we talked, and then one night I'm cruising the Castro Valley Strip, and I see her car parked over here by the hair shop across the street from the pizza parlor. And it's like, well, the hair shop's closed, so she's not here. I wonder if she's hanging out inside the pizza parlor. So I make a U-turn, go park my bike, go on into the pizza parlor, and she's waitressing there. I'm like, all right. So I sit down and order a pizza. 40 minutes later, another girl comes out and says, we lost your order. What did you want? So she had taken my order and got so nervous and done something with it, okay? And so then I ended up getting my pizza, and we ended up talking a little bit, and then we started going out on the regular, and we would ride the bike, you know, and yeah, it was fun.
So let me run this statement by you, Warner. I want to hear your reaction, because I've been listening to you talk. A woman could be like a bag of dope, but with skin wrapped around it.
Totally.
So what's your take on that?
She was totally the bag of dope. Totally, man. I was done.
Right.
Hook, line, and sinker, man. Especially when I found out that she was 18. Okay? So we go out on our first date, and for some reason or another, I took her out to my sister's house in Oakland. And on the way back, we're just, you know, first date conversation, and I asked her when her birthday was. And, you know, she said October 7th. And I said, no way. So that's my birthday. And she says, no way. So I made her get out her license, and she's a year younger than me, but we're on the same day. And that was fate. That was like, okay, I'm going to marry this girl. This is it. I am done. I'm not going out with anybody else. I'm going out with her. 3 throughout the process, earlier in the conversation we were talking, and I introduced her to crank, and she introduced me to rolling machines. I couldn't roll a joint for anything. My friends would roll them with dollar bills, or I'd use a Coke can, and get high, or I'd put fittings together and make a pipe, or I'd go buy a pipe somewhere at, the 11 to 7 whatever shop, and that's how I smoked my pot. And I snorted my crank, or I put it in my coffee. And that was it,
So you found your running partner.
Yeah.
And then, and it's funny because you described this, and I can't see this going any way but bad, but I'm sitting in your house today, right?
Right.
So, like, where does the disease take you to the point to where you said you've had enough?
Oh, that was a long time away.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got married in 1980, August of 1980, and we ran hard. We partied hard. We had an apartment, and everybody came over, and then we ended up renting a house from a guy that moved in with her mom, and everybody came over, and we partied hard. And there was a time, all of a sudden, she decided that it's time to have a family. So I had to quit everything. And for me, that was difficult.
Right.
Because I liked the crank, and I liked the pot. The alcohol was fine without. But she'd take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. No problem. Done today. Okay?
Right.
Never touch it again.
And for somebody
How do you do that?
Right.
Okay? How do you do that? She could walk away from a beer at the pizza parlor, where I'd be like grabbing hers and finishing it before he left. And so she gets me clean. 6 months later, we're getting pregnant, and we're having a baby, and our oldest son was born, and I'm sitting out in the garage, and I hadn't gotten high or done any crank for like a year. Okay, so I've been clean. I'm sitting out in the garage, and I got a joint, roll the joint, and with the rolling machine, it's an extra white paper, and it comes out like a cigarette, out of like a Marlboro Red, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you don't have to do this, as I'm lighting it, okay? And then that started it, okay? That joint led to finding that guy, Donnie, the Hell's Angel, okay, and getting crank and running for 2 more years. And she knew I was smoking pot. She knew I was probably doing some crank or some coke on the side. Didn't know how much I was doing, but said, it's time to have another baby. You need to stop doing all that. So I do. I stopped doing all that. And 4 months later, she's like, okay. And we're working on getting pregnant, and we got a baby on the way. But there was once she was pregnant, there was no downtime. It was like, whew, I was on, okay? Because she had a baby at home that she was taking care of. She was pregnant with one. She had dogs that she was taking care of, and I was working.
Right.
So, and she was a stay-at-home mom. And I started using again, and using. And in the 80s, I changed jobs every 2.5 years, either because I had a bad attitude, which I could never figure out why I had a bad attitude, from the ups and downs of crank.
Yeah.
Gee, you think you got a bad attitude? Man, or it was for more money or better benefits. I had a bad attitude. You wouldn't give me a raise, and I had a bad attitude. So I went and got another job. Okay? And now all of a sudden you want to give me a raise. Well, no, I'm moving on. Okay? And this guy over here, it's like, and I'm working on cars. And I've developed quite a skill working on cars. And I'm working on the side. I'm going to people's houses. And I'm trading for drugs. It's a huge circle, man.
Right.
It's just a stop using, take a drug test, get a new job, start using. Have a bad attitude, get pissed off, stop using, take a drug test, get a new job, and move on. Okay, I did all of that until I was 86, 87, 1987. I had a guy tell me, why don't you come over to my shop and this guy had his own shop, and he had his own race car, and I knew him through my old boss of racing, and he says, why don't you come over and move your stuff in and work in my shop and start taking it over? Okay. I got a chance to take over a established business. It was a foreign cars and easy stuff I knew. And I start working, and he comes around one day, and I was just like tweaked out, man. And he's just like looking at me, and the next day he comes by and says, we need to go to lunch. So we go to lunch, and he tells me, you need to get your shit out of here. You're just like, you're too far off. You're not, this isn't right. It's not good. It's not healthy. You need to pack up your stuff and get it out of here. So I did that, and I lost it. I went, it's just like, lost it. I call it a crank-induced breakdown, okay? I was doing so much crank at the time that I just lost it. So I had a bag, I packed some stuff into my car, and I drove to Texas to see my old friend, okay? 3 days later, I left thinking that I'll be in Texas by the morning, okay? I was in Arizona by morning, okay? Nowhere near Texas. Still needed to go through New Mexico and into Texas, okay? And he lived in the Fort Worth area, so that's, you're going all the way across. Right, and I get there, the bag is empty, and I sleep on his couch for 3 days, and we eat at night and talk about the kids, talk about the wife, and his girlfriend's there, and we're talking, and on the fourth day, he hands me a $100 bill and says, you need to go home. So I went home. I came home. And we lived in Castro Valley. We were renting a duplex at the time. And when I got home, there was just turmoil. Okay, because, my oldest brother told Tammy she needed to file an abandonment thing with the police and get me like arrested and thrown out or whatever, and she wouldn't do that. But they knew that now they finally know that there's some kind of a problem going on. And so Tammy, her grandma lived across on the other side of Castro Valley, so she packs up the boys and stays with her grandma. And it's just like, I'm devastated. I'm not working. I'm in this 3-bedroom duplex, locked into there, not doing anything. And my dad sneaks in. And it's like, my dad had always said, if you don't like it here, then go somewhere else. If you don't like the clothes I'm buying you, get a job and buy your own. And I did all that stuff. And he shows up, and somehow or another, he found a door that was unlocked, and he came walking on in. My dad was very quiet. He could come walking down a hallway, and you wouldn't even hear it crick and creak. He walks in, and I'm standing there in the bedroom, and I'm crying, and he says something, and I jumped, and then I looked at him. I says, you didn't care about me in the past. Why do you care about me now? I'm paying the bills here. You need to get the fuck out. This is my house. I'm paying the bills. You need to fucking go. And he left. Okay. It was a couple days later, my sister comes over and pops me one in the face. I popped her back. She pops me again. I popped her back. She grabs my ear. Strong ass. Okay? She got a hold of my ear, and she drags me outside and puts me in her car and says, you're coming to stay with me, and Tammy's coming back here. So she gets a hold of Tammy's grandma, tells Tammy's grandma that I'm gone, and Tammy and the boys can come back to the house, and I'm going to stay with her. So my sister, for as ornery as my sister has become, at times, my sister did a lot for me. Okay, I lived there for 3 weeks. She fed me and helped me get back to being a person. She got me in contact with a psychologist that was mainly an AA guy. And he was experimenting with these large doses of vitamins, of different packs of vitamins. And so she started buying those for me. And I started talking to this guy. And in the first 3 weeks, she had me there 3 days a week. Okay, and once I was okay and I was taking the vitamins and it was time, I needed to get a job. So I went and I knew a guy that owned a shop down in San Leandro and the auto doctor. And I went down and talked to Terry and he said, yeah, come on. I got a stall back here. Go get your toolbox, bring it in. I bring my toolbox in and I got this stall and I'm clean. And he's working with me. He lets me take 2 hours off twice a week to drive out to Oakland to see this guy and to come back. And twice a week I'm doing that. And then it gets down to once a week. My sister paid for that for 1.5 years for me to go see this guy. Okay. And she took care of me. And I was clean. And in the process of all this, he said I needed to find an NA meeting. What's that? What do you mean? Well, you're going to have to give me all your stuff too. What do you mean to give you all my stuff? All of your paraphernalia. Everything that you use with. I ain't giving you my prototype. I had a prototype. Well, prototype was, it was a brass pipe that had a pin and you could had a resin trap and you can clean out the holes and push the resin trap out, scrape it. It had a little container that spun and held pot. Okay, it was the ultimate pipe. And it had a lid on it so you could take a hit and you push the lid and there's no smoke. You just hold it in until there's no smoke. So, and he says your wife needs to come, and she comes and she brings all of my paraphernalia and gives it to him.
And I'm sure you weren't happy about that.
Oh God, no.
I need to use your restroom real quick.
Yes, sir.
I'm starting to. Jesse's got.
We had Katie, and I was clean. I was really clean. And then I got to thinking one day, I'm at this job and I'm doing good, making money, got good benefits, and I'm thinking, you're not saving any money. You're not doing anything for 30 years down the road. All of a sudden, something hit me one day. I'm not doing anything for 30 years down the road. Okay, so I'm 30 years old, and I'm thinking I'm not doing anything. Okay, so I started thinking about stuff and looking at stuff, and I figured out I needed a union job. So I went down. We had an hour lunch. This guy, we took an hour lunch. We brought in equipment and closed the doors and left for an hour. Okay, that was his thing. Get out of here. Get away. We all got away. So I went down to UPS in Oakland and applied for a job. 2 days later, they called the house, and I get home, and I called them back, and I set up an appointment for an interview. And and from the time that I interviewed to the time that I got back to Washington Avenue in San Leandro, they had called the house and told Tammy to have me come back. And I got hired. So I started working at UPS. And in the 2 weeks that prior, a friend of mine that worked on boats down the street that I went to high school with comes walking up to the back door and he's shaking a bag. And he's like, hey, I hear you got the job at UPS. And I'm like, how'd you hear that? He goes, dude, word travels in our industry. He says, you want to celebrate? Nanoseconds. And we were in the bathroom, got the toilet bowl lid on top of the sink, doing lines.
Well, that's how we celebrated back then.
How we celebrated, right. And it's like, and then it hit me. It's like, whoa. I'm doing exactly what Anthony said. I'm going to relapse. So I used for another 2 weeks. I started getting cranked from that guy. And but I'd already taken the drug test for UPS. I had the job. I'd already taken the drug test. So I could use. And I started working a 12 to 8:30 shift. And scared to death. Knew nothing about what I was getting into. But I knew I could do it. And I'm laying under a truck one night, afternoon. We're getting trained on how to do certain things, me and this other guy. And I thought, holy shit, you're doing exactly what Anthony said you're going to do. And I finished that bag and stopped. and I stayed clean for another year. Clean. No recovery. I never went to an NA meeting. Okay. I just stayed clean. And then I got bored. It was a boring job. If you've worked on one UPS truck, you've worked on them all. And then I started using. I found a guy in the building that that had crank. I found another guy in the building that had green bud, and I was off and running. And it took them 7 years for them to, before things finally disintegrated, and they said, you need to resign or we're going to railroad you out of here, and you're not going to have any kind of a name left to work with. And that was devastating. I've never had anything like that happen to me in my work history in my life, okay? Never. It was devastating. I'm losing this job that I was good at. I was good at it. Even loaded. I was good at it. And I'm off on vacation. And apparently, I had switched from Oakland to San Ramon, which was a flagship facility because the main offices were also just down the street. So the San Ramon building was a flagship facility, okay? And they had taken all of the vehicles there and changed them from being diesel to gasoline and from gasoline to natural gas, which then gave them all of the energy credits they needed, okay? Big business, you know? And I started working on the natural gas equipment, and I'm using, okay? I'm loaded. And I'm working on this natural gas equipment. Something goes wrong, and they're flying a part in. I go to the Oakland airport, I get it, and it's a Sunday afternoon. I pick up the part, I go back to the shop to fix the pumps and make everything work. And I'm out there working on it, and the loss prevention people show up. And loss prevention and a supervisor, and there was somebody else. But the Friday before, this LP girl was really concerned about what we did with the keys when somebody delivered a piece of equipment. Well, a man lift was delivered. So I left the keys in the office. I said, we'll just leave them right here on the, and they'll be safe there. Yeah. Nobody's going to come in and bother this. So I'm out here working, and they all show up. And they're like, how long are you going to be? What's going on? How long are you going to be? How much longer? And so I finish, and I thought, man, that's weird. So I left, and I went down, typical addict, okay? I went down and parked and walked through the parking lot in the backside and peeked through the fence. And I could see them inside the shop with the man lift, okay? And they were doing something up high. So that was Sunday. Monday I come in, and it's really clean on the floor by this door. And I'm like, what the heck are they doing? What are they doing? So I look up, and there's like this, like a watch, like a Timex watch on a pipe. It's on a water pipe. And it's like, well, that's a sprinkler. And then I touch the top of the door, and there's sheetrock. So I go outside and I look, and there's a cable. And at the time, I was doing one of the ones that did building maintenance. So we had what they call a best lock, which you put in a core key and you pull out the core, and then you put in a different core, and you could use a different key to open the door. So I did all that. Sneaky stuff, okay? I followed this cable to this locked room. I went back, got a core, changed it out, went in, and it's recording. It's a camera. I could see they had a monitor, and they had it hooked to a recorder, and it was recording the shop. Whew. So I caught them putting a camera in. They were looking for people stealing time, okay? They caught the day shift guy, supposed to be doing something, fired his ass. They caught another night shift guy, supposed to be doing something, and fired his ass. The other guy, which was a black guy, played the card, okay? And they finally got him. And now, all of a sudden, a guy with 7 years is #1 seniority in this shop, okay? So now I'm working day shift, and I am just getting loaded, man. I am so spun. Apparently, I did something, and I was off on vacation, and one of the car wash guys calls and says, hey, they're down here, like, they got cameras, and they're inspecting all of the stuff that you did, and you had a wheel come off. I was like, I have the wheel come off. That's so loaded. How could I prove that I didn't have one? So I go down and talk to him, and in that conversation, I had said that, okay, if this stuff happened, then I should be suspended and moved back to Oakland to where he could watch me. And he says, well, somewhere in that conversation, he says, what are you on? I said, oh, on anything. What do you mean? I was so loaded. So it came down to a termination letter, and I filed a grievance on it because it was a union job. We went to this panel, and I stopped off at a friend's house on the way, and I did a big old fat blasting line. And the people from the company come in, and there's people from the union come in. One of the guys that came in from the company was a manager at one time, and I told him that, you know, if I get the opportunity and I see you out back, I'm going to run your ass over. And he's the one that comes walking in to make a decision as to whether or not I should have a job.
Yeah, I guess you lost your job. Huh?
Oh, yeah. I resigned. That was when it came down to, you need to resign or we're going to railroad you out of here and we're going to tarnish your name and you're not going to work again.
Well, and even with all this stuff going on, it seems like you always land on your feet, right?
I did.
Because from that, you probably went to the tool truck.
No,
Right?
from that, I went and worked on the natural gas stuff, okay, with that company for 6 months.
So in your mind, all this, life's still manageable,
Yes.
right? And so where does it go from this point to where it's like, I got to change, right? So when does this happen?
Oh, not yet.
Right.
Not yet. Not yet.
So what's the pivot point for Werner? Where does it get to the point where it's like, man, something's got to give here?
So I did the natural gas thing, and was based out of Texas. Lived in Texas for 3 months, started using again.
It's the same cycle.
Same cycle.
Over and over.
That's my cycle.
And you can't recognize it yet, right?
No.
Right.
No, I don't think, I see it, but I don't see a problem.
You don't see a problem.
It's not a problem.
Because everything, and it was
Everybody else's problem.
right.
It's her fault that I got to go work like this and do this.
Take care of all these kids and do
Right.
all this shit.
It's her fault.
Right.
Everything was her fault. But yet she stood by me forever.
Right. And you can't realize this yet.
Forever. Okay? Took care of me. And so I get out of the natural gas and I go to work for Penske Truck Leasing. And Progression, I'm using. They start talking about drug testing, random testing for everybody, not just people with a commercial license. And then they were going to get this account and they were going to open up a graveyard shift. And two of the bosses said, and you're going to run it. I said, no, I'm not. I'll go get another job. And they laughed. So I got clean, went and got another job, working out here at Central Valley Volkswagen. And that was when I got the opportunity to get the tool truck. So July, my son's birthday, right around his birthday, July, I signed on the dotted line for $100,000. I had the credit, I had money in the bank, and I got the tool truck, and I was clean. They did a hair test, passed that, because I had been clean. So I'd been using, but I was kind of clean. So the tool truck was the pivot.
Right.
The tool truck was the pivot. You know.
Well, in our text, it always says we continuously focus on the lengths of clean time that we had, not thinking about all the stuff in between.
No.
And that's you.
Right. Well,
Right.
and the lengths of clean time that I had were just clean time.
Right.
There was no recovery involved in it. You know, NA wasn't involved in it. NA came into my mind when I was driving around in Oakdale one day, and I'm so low, I'm so twacked out. I'm not selling anything. I'm looking for a spot to park and hide. Okay, and all of a sudden something hit me that I needed to find an NA meeting, and I never followed through. Tammy said something to me about using. No, I manipulated it away. She said something another time, and finally in July of 2004, it's like 7:30 in the morning, probably July 5th or 6th, and I'm getting ready to go. I go into the house, and she confronts me about being loaded, and I was. I had just gone out to the tool truck and done a fat line and took a hit off a pipe. And I went into the house to say goodbye. Well, I lit a cigarette first, and then went into the house to say goodbye, and she confronted me again. I said, "Nah, you're crazy. What the heck? You're crazy." Well, my eyes were sunk back in my head. I was down to 150 pounds, okay? Yeah, I was...
You're tore up.
Tore up. And she says, "You look like you did when we first got married, and we used to get wired and go to the San Jose flea market and pilfer through everybody's stuff and find shit to buy." And I manipulated it back around and I left. And as I go out into the garage, it's a typical Modesto day. Hot, dry, no wind. A wind comes in to the garage and it's whoosh, just like that. And I felt my dad and I felt my friend. I had a friend that died in the disease of addiction. And I felt it was like they scooped me up with my arms and turned me around and brought me back into the house, and I collapsed and I told Tammy everything. And she yelled at me, told me I was an asshole and you're fucking stupid and what are you doing? And I knew you shouldn't have done this tool truck. But I said, "Will you help me?" And she said, "Yeah." So we clean out the tool truck, and for the next 2 weeks, she's riding with me. Okay, she's going out with me on the road, making sure I'm collecting money and selling tools and not selling drugs. I got to the point where I was selling more crank than I was tools.
Right.
I had a scale set up. I had baggies. I had cops following me. That this guy that I met that was making the stuff. The feds were picking me up when I would leave his house. And I didn't realize that until I saw that guy. And then I started noticing cars, okay? And I would see cars turn, and it's like, oh, why? Paranoid, but it was actually happening. And it came down to one night, I was at a guy's house, and I picked up some crank, and I had my backpack, and I'm ready to go home, and we walk out front, and the Stanislaus County Stolen Car Task Force is out front. Lights are going, guns are out. Both of you freeze, and it's like, I've never been through anything like this, okay? So they question us for a few minutes, and then they realize that this is the guy that is renting this house, okay? And he's renting a room to a guy that's stealing cars, and he's bringing the stolen cars back, okay? Well, I'd met this guy once, and he was a fucking freak, okay? I wanted nothing to do with this guy, okay? And I told my buddy that, and he said, "Fine, don't worry, well, so it's okay." So he's there that night, out the back window, up over the fence, down the, oh yeah, he was gone, okay? Stolen car over here, cops are here. I managed to make it to the tool truck with this backpack, and I'm standing there, and they take my friend and they put him in the back seat of a car, and I'm just, don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know what you're talking about. I've met the guy once. I didn't like him, so I don't come around when he's here. Well, what are you doing? I'm collecting money for tools. This is my late night. I was at Del Monte. Now I'm here, and now I'm going home. And finally, half hour, 45 minutes later, we're standing out front. He says, "Okay, go ahead and go." And my tool truck's parked in the driveway. So I get the door open, and I sling that backpack as far back as I could, okay? And he says, "Wait a minute." So I turn around, and he says, "Sit down." I sit down on the step, and he's just in my face telling me how I'm lying, and I know everything that's going on, and never once said, "Are you using? What's going on?" Finally, I had Nextel, and Tammy beeps me, and she says, "Where the hell are you?" And I says, "I'm over at Raymond's talking to the cops. They think I'm stealing cars." She goes, "What the fuck? You need to get your ass home." And the cop is like, "Go on, get out of here." That was a turning point.
Right.
That was when the mirror started to talk to me. When I get up out of bed and I walked towards the bathroom, the mirror was like, "You're a fucking idiot. you're going to lose fucking everything. You're going to lose your wife. You're going to lose your kids. You're going to lose the house. You're going to lose your business. You need to change what you're doing. So I reverted back to classic basic tech stuff. I weighed out. I weighed out certain amounts for myself throughout the day, okay? Took that much with me, used it all, went home, got more, okay? Didn't work, okay? So then the day comes around where she confronts me, and I was also selling crank to my neighbor. I used him as the excuse to keep using.
Right.
Because he would come down and say, you got to get me something, got to get me something, got to get me something. So naturally, I'm going to go get him something, get myself some, okay? So we're still using. He leaves it in his nightstand, and his wife finds it. And it's like, okay. And then I get confronted, okay? And I'm like, I got to come clean, because she's going to come down and say something. Because that's the type of woman that she is. She's going to come down and say something to Tammy. And she does not. And he found a treatment center that took our insurance. And I had the same, we both had Kaiser. And so I go to this treatment center he talks me into, I go to this treatment center for an assessment, and they're like, oh, we have a bed open for you right now.
Oh, shit.
You want to call your family and tell them you're staying? I'm like, no. So that was like on a Wednesday or something. Then I learned that treatment center was going to go out to the Modesto Reservoir for the weekend. And I thought, there ain't no way I'm going camping with all of these people that I don't know to the Modesto Reservoir and not have any drugs or anything with me. There's no way. So I passed. And I got stuff together with the truck and found a place for it to go. And on Monday, July 28th, I went into the treatment center.
Right.
And I stayed until, I stayed for 40 days, 40 nights. And
so
then
what was your attitude like going to that treatment facility? Was it I got a second chance here, I'm going to change, or am I going to appease people? And
totally negative.
right.
But I also had in my head that, why do I keep doing this?
Right.
What is going on? I need to learn what's going on so I don't keep doing this, okay? And, when I went into the treatment center, there's, a 3-day blackout, and then they have a family group come in while I'm on my blackout, and I can't use the phone. And finally, I'm able to use the phone, and I call Tammy, and I talk her into coming to this family group. So she comes, and I forget if she came by herself or she brought someone. But it started to change things. And just before that, I had got into it with my case manager. And he was such a calm, peaceful, he was everything that I needed in a case manager.
Right.
Okay? And I'm just having a fit. And we're sitting on my bed, and he's like, brother, what's the matter? Why are you yelling at me? And I sat there and looked at him like, I don't know. And I just started crying. I just broke down. I said, why am I yelling? Because you're scared. You have fear of change. And that was the turning point. Then family group came. And there was a guy that was running family group at the time that was like a psychologist. And he could bring everything out. And Tammy ended up bringing my mom, which was just old and didn't understand, and then finally started to understand how things that she did affected me and what had happened in my life, and started accepting about me being molested by my grandfather. Because when that came out, she said, oh no, that couldn't have happened.
Right.
And in total denial. My siblings never, ever acknowledged it, still have not. My sister has a little bit, okay? My brothers, no. Never said anything. So family group and treatment center, and I'm writing, and I find a sponsor at the men's meeting. We're able to walk down to the men's meeting because, it's summertime. So, you can get up and you could go walk down to the men's meeting until 8:30 and then walk back, and it's just starting to get dark. And because that was July, so I was in there for 40 days, so that's all through August into September. And then I went back for 30 days of day treatment, 8 hours a day. And I finally went back to work working on trucks out in Hayward, November 4th. Yeah. 2004.
So you got about 5 months clean. Mm-hmm. And so what does life look like? And at that point, did you feel
Life is scary.
Right.
Life is scary. It was. It came to a point to going home. And when I left to the treatment center, Tammy wouldn't take me. She had gotten over the time of helping me clean out the tow truck and get rid of all the drugs and the paraphernalia and the stuff that I had. The anger and the frustration built and built and built. And finally, it was the day to go to the treatment center. And I was packed. I had a little bag packed, and I was ready to go. I said, "Come on, let's go." And she says, "I'm not taking you. You can fucking walk. Find your own way there." And my oldest son came up and said, "Mike, will you give me a ride?" And he gave me a ride to the treatment center. And, then the blackout. And then finally got on the calls and resisted. And then finally things started changing. And then family group came about. And her and I, we ended up doing a communication package. Okay, so when I was at this treatment center, there was an influx of parolees. Okay, we ended up having to put bunk beds together and get ready for them. And 7 or 8 guys came in, and then a whole bunch of women came in, and all of a sudden there's like 85 people in family group, packed. And they're, "Werner and Tammy, why don't you come up and do your communication package?" And that was the best thing ever.
Right.
It talked about what she expected out of me, what she liked about me, what she didn't like about me, all of that. And there was like 4 pages and that we had to go through. We each had to answer all of it and write about it. And that was one of the turning points that when it was time to come home, it was okay. I could come home. And, but it was scary.
Right. And so when you're in that treatment facility, you talked about your first stint in a 12-step recovery fellowship, not being able to see the similarities and the differences, right? And now you're a guy that still hasn't been incarcerated like me, right? And you're in this facility, you're in there with parolees, right?
Scary.
And in that process, did you start to see the similarities, or were you still indifferent to all this stuff?
I started to see it.
Right.
I started writing. That treatment facility is all about writing, and it still is today. Okay? And I went through so many different packages of stuff that they had. I came out of a room that these 2 guys shared, and this guy was a lifetime criminal, and I took over his bed, and he was the guy that had turned his life around and was now in the sober living house.
Do you remember where you left off?
Treatment center.
Okay, perfect. We're good.
Treatment center. It was December of 2004. I got my first service position. I was assistant GSR for Saturday Night Live. Okay, and I went to the January ASC meeting with the GSR, and the following day he decided that the pain pills were better and disappeared. And I have not seen that guy Dan ever since. Okay, and ever since. Don't know what happened to him, and I hope he's still alive. I hope he's found his way back to recovery, But that position, when I got there, I was like, whoa. I was scared, and then it was like, I want to do that. I like that. We were at Doctors Medical Center then for ASC, and the lady that was the chair, I was like, I want to do that. That's cool. I want to learn about that. I want to do that. And life goes along, and I get the job back where I used to work. I call it, here's God working in my life, okay? Something that I'm beginning to notice is I left a guy that was dealing crank, left his house one night, and 20 minutes later it got raided. Everybody went to jail.
Right.
And that looks like I was the rat, okay? But I wasn't. And, my buddy, my friend is like, hey, they're asking questions about you. I say, it ain't me, man. I went to work right after that. Okay, and I worked with this guy that had hooked me up with him, and so it wasn't me. It ended up being somebody else. There's a God.
Right.
Okay, there's a God in my life. Okay, coming home, you know, I told you about how I was working in San Ramon, and then at the same time, I worked 3 days in San Ramon and 2 days in Ceres because we had just bought a house out here. So I was going to transfer to the Ceres UPS, and I had it figured out that when I got on the freeway at 98th Avenue, I could take a hit off my pipe. Now this is, grant you, this is 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning because we worked 6 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. And then I figured out that when I went from 880 to 238 to get on to 580, that right in that area right there, I could take another hit. I had it down. So the car had cruise control, and back then the ramps that went through Pleasanton were on and off, on, off, on, off. And several times I had highway patrol behind me. You could see it. I could see their lights. You know, you could see the outline. And I got the cruise control on at 68, 70 miles an hour. And I'm loaded to the hilt. Just so loaded. And they get off the freeway. And then they get back on. And they're right there. You know, and I had that happen 2 or 3 times. And there's a God, another time, a God has carried me when I should have went to jail.
Right.
You know, okay, driving under the influence. So we're back working, and it's January of '05, and I was trying to quit smoking, and I was chewing the gum, but at work I was smoking. Tammy calls me and she says, "Hey, MID's here to turn off the power. What do you want me to do?" I said, "Well, there's money in the bank. Write him a check." Okay. So, you know, and then it hits me. What are you doing? You're chewing the gum and you're smoking. Why are you wasting money like that if you can't pay the MID? So I finished the gum, finished the cigarettes, and quit. January of '05. Okay. July of '05 comes. I celebrate a year. And September of '05 comes, and I can't swallow to chew a sandwich, and I have a little golf ball sticking out of the side of my neck. And one of the guys I'm working with is like, "Dude, that's not right, man. That could be cancer. You need to go to the doctor." And I still have my tonsils, so I knew that I should be sick because my tonsils were bright pink and swollen. And I knew that I should be home in bed with a fever and be really sick, and I wasn't. I felt fine. So I go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Huh, I saw you last year at this time on a Thursday. What are you doing here now?" I said, "My throat hurts. I can't talk." And he looks, and he's looking at it, and he looks at it, and he's, okay, takes a culture, sends it out, and he says, "So you want the good news or the good news?" I'm like, "Huh?" He says, "Well, you don't have strep throat. That's one of the good news." He said, "The other not so good news is that you probably got cancer. And I'm not sure what it is yet, so let's run some tests." And you hear that, and it's like, there's people that will listen to this and they'll be like, "Oh, I know what that's like. You get that cancer, I'm going to die. You know, it's a death sentence. Why did I get clean?" Fortunately, I had had enough of a buildup, enough foundation. The first step, man, I had like 75 pages in my first step that I processed with my sponsor. My second step, learning to find a power greater than me, and then to relieve me from sanity. And then the third step, to trust and turn my will over. Was right there when all of this is going on. And in my second step, and I got out to the car and I thought, I'm going out to the riverbank. I'm going to get loaded. And the second thought was, call Phil. So I call my sponsor, and he talks to me all the way home. Well, all the way from Dale Road to Prescott and Standiford is where we lived over there behind the old Burger King. Burger King's gone now. And we lived back there, and I pull into the driveway, and Tammy and my son Nick are standing there in the driveway. And I guess you could see it in my face. And they were like, Tammy's like, "What's the matter?" You know, and I get out of the car and I say goodbye to Philip, and I get out of the car and I'm crying. I say, I got cancer. They think I have some kind of cancer. And that was a life-changing moment. You know, I went back to work the next day, and the guy that I worked with, he's like, well, what did the doctor say? I said, he says I got some form of cancer. And the poor guy, his face just turned white. His name was Guy. And his face, he was just like, and so that's September of 2005, the first part, like the first of the month. I go see a ear, nose, and throat guy, and they do a biopsy, and they suck fluid out of my neck, out of there. And this guy is standing here, and I'm watching him, and his face changes. And it's like, what's the matter? And he says, nothing. And I said, bullshit. What's the matter? And he says, well, for the color of this, you don't have what we think you have. And I said, is that good or bad? He said, I don't know. I got to confer with my fellow people here. So he goes out, comes back, and he's got this probe. It's a foot long, got a handle on it. And he squirts some shit under my nose and suck that down, and I do that, and he sticks this probe up, and, you know, and I got my eyes closed, and it's a foot long, okay? And he says, everything okay? And I got my eyes closed, and I open up my eyes, and his hand is right here. And that was when it hit me that whole thing's in my head. And, well, he was looking down in here, and he could see it. And it turned out I had squamous cell carcinoma of tonsils, tongue, voice box, everything that's involved here. But I had let it go so long, it engulfed my shoulders and my chest. Okay? Everything that day didn't go the way they wanted, so they set me up for a biopsy. And they take me to, I go to Manteca Kaiser, and they cut the top of my tonsils off. And you could see the little black spots. Had cancer, okay? They figured out what I had. We're in recovery room, and I said, so we'll just take my tonsils out and we'll be done. And he says, oh no. He says, we'll cut you. We would have to cut you from your lower lip way down, all the way down into here to your abdomen, and then we would have to rebuild your neck to hold your head up, and we'd have to give you a new voice box and everything, and nobody's going to do that surgery.
So you're full of cancer.
Full of cancer. So I'm laying there and I'm thinking, you know, I'm under anesthesia, and I'm like, I'm gonna fucking die. What the fuck? I got clean to die.
Right.
You know. And he says, well, what we will do is we'll treat it with severe chemotherapy and severe radiation, and we'll see what happens in 6 months. I tell you, I went and started all that, and I had to go through dental procedure after dental procedure because they're going to radiate your mouth, and that just tears up your jaws and everything. And it's they make a mask that goes over your face and conforms to your face and holds your head down on the table. And for 45 minutes every day, I had radiation that started over here, went all the way around, and came over to here and lined up. There's 3 tattoos somewhere. I can't find them anymore.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. And here I am.
Right.
It responded. I got so sick. I had somebody invite me to a sweat, and that first Tuesday when everything started, I was laying in bed. I got sick right away. Okay, the chemo, that was a Monday, and I had a backpack hooked to me. I had a port that ran through here. Okay, and they had a backpack hooked to me, and every 90 seconds it went off. And I could taste it. So I'm making a ham and Swiss sandwich, ham and cheese sandwich, and I didn't feel good, and started getting sick. And I was sick from that day in November, the first Monday in November, all the way until February of 2006. And I went back to work exactly 6 months to the day.
You're a working fool.
Yeah. I'm a walking, talking miracle.
Yeah.
And all of this time, I'm processing my second step. I'm doing my third step. One of the guys that is still clean, that I went to treatment with, and another guy that was in a class ahead of me, that was in a group ahead of me, and a guy that was in a group with me, and another guy that was in a group ahead of me came over and we had a meeting at the house. I got invited to this sweat, and I was telling you on that first Tuesday I'm laying in bed, and they used almond wood to heat up the rocks. I could smell the almond wood and I could hear them. It was the craziest thing ever. And 2 days later, these guys come over and I said something to my friend Gary, and he said, well, yeah, you felt that we were praying for you. And, somebody made me some tea, and every morning I would wobble outside and I would look to the east and I would take a drink of this tea, and I'd go back inside and I'd get sick, and I couldn't eat. I lost 75 pounds total in 2 months, 35 the first month, and then they put a feeding tube in, and Tammy we would put the stuff in really slow, and I'd sit with mashed potatoes and gravy and smell that. There was times that when we first started to learn how to use it, she had the syringe and she went, "Ooh," and I went, "Blah." Came right, it was just like, whoa, wait a minute. That was an ordeal.
Right.
And I was in service with Saturday Night Live, and now I didn't move. Okay. After the second week, I needed help to get to the bathroom. I needed help to take a shower. Okay. Once the feeding tube went in, there was times that I passed out in the shower because it moved. Feeding tubes move, and your gases come out. Tammy, I don't feel good. Next thing I know, she's like in the shower, standing there like hanging on to me, and like, oh, hi. She says, you went out. I said, oh, I thought so. And she helped me to bed, once again, she took care of me.
Right. The
person that I blamed for everything and as the reason why I needed to use took care of me and brought me back to life. I used to get so dehydrated I would change colors, and she'd say, okay, let's go. And she'd get me up, and I was so cold all the time. I had long underwear on. I had pajamas on. I had sweats on, and I was cold. And she had quilts over the top of me galore, and I was cold. But she would pack me up, and we'd go to the infusion center, and they'd put fluids into me, and I'd be fine for 3 days. And finally it was over, and I started to eat, and I came back and went back to Saturday Night Live, and service started to save me then. It was, then I got really involved with service. I was treasurer for Nooners. I was GSR for Saturday Night Live. I was secretary for the men's meeting. Then I was secretary for Common Needs because I worked Tuesday through Saturday. So I could get home at 4:30 on Saturday afternoon, take a shower, get something to eat, and go to Saturday Night Live. I was off on Sunday. I could go to the men's meeting, okay? I was off on Sundays. I could go to ASC. I could represent, I didn't go to work until 2:30 in the afternoon. I could go to Nooners and stay until 1:15 and leave and get to Hayward in time for work, okay? So I had all these positions going. I did all that for like 3.5 years. And reading the basic text, we find ourselves doing things in service and in NA that are still keeping us away from the house like we did when we were using. So Philip and I start talking about that. And, the treasurer position comes up. And I walk away. I step back. The GSR position comes up for Saturday Night Live. And somebody made the comment that if you don't step away, nobody's going to stand up. So I backed away, and it went for a month without a GSR. And then somebody stepped up. And I learned that it's going to be okay, but it's going to be different.
Right.
Okay? It's going to be different. I stayed in service with Saturday Night Live. I was treasurer for Saturday Night Live. I was secretary. I was co-secretary,
True addict.
Saturday Night Live was my meeting, okay? Yeah. Common Needs, that position ended. I let that go. The men's meeting, that position ended. I let that go, and I stayed with Saturday Night Live, and then something came up with the men's meeting, and next thing you know, I'm the treasurer for the men's meeting, and so now I got 2 positions, and all of this time, after I processed the 3rd step and started writing on the 4th step, I would write, and the turmoil, the shit that would come out, would make me just stop dead in my tracks. I'd on the shelf.
Right.
And I wouldn't touch it for a month and a half. It took me 3 years to complete my 4th step. My 4th step was probably 85 pages long. Okay? Took us 5 hours to do it. Okay? Yeah. And but everything came out. Everything came out in the 1st step too. All of I let it out because by then I had come to trust Philip, and grown to love the guy and realized what he could do, and that was where recovery came in, and I talked to him every day with my insanity, and he talked me through it every day. I'd drive for an hour, and we'd talk for an hour.
And he was patient.
And I have a sponsee now that I can drive, and I can talk to for an hour. That is just as crazy as I was back then.
Well, and can you explain what that relationship means to someone like you that went through their early childhood? Children are to be seen, not heard, right? You didn't really have that supporting father figure,
no,
right? And then finding this stuff in recovery, what's the shift like? For you mentally, how does it make you feel? Validate you?
Yes, makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm worth something.
Right.
Doing this today actually makes me feel like I'm worth something now. Okay, getting invited by you to do this was like, whoa, that's really huge. This guy thought about me. I've never thought about myself like that.
Right.
And for you to come and say, I want to hear your story and talk to us about it and let's do a podcast on it. And that is just like, yeah, and you talk about how I grew up, and then you talk about everything that I wrote about and where Philip was involved with it all and how my life came around. I forgot to mention that early on, the way Tammy was raised and the way I was raised, neither one of us liked it. So we changed things. We didn't carry on. We sat at the dinner table and there was no TV on. We talked. The kids made noise.
Right.
Yeah. We flung food at each other, We knocked glasses over and didn't get yelled at, and oh no, watch out. And then make a line.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, it's running on them, but okay, fine. It's not, it's easy. It's not a big deal, man.
Yeah.
It's just milk. It's just water. It's just a soda. Relax. Okay. So we changed, her and I changed all kinds of stuff.
You're able to break cycles.
Even though all of the drugs that I did and how I blamed her for everything that I did because she's a stay-at-home mom and I got to go to work and do all this shit. And then I got to come home and go to baseball practice. And then I got to come home and go to Boy Scout, go to Cub Scouts and then into Boy Scouts. And I got to take them. I took them to karate. Or I had her take them to karate. I wanted them to learn some discipline, different type of discipline. But they didn't like that. They played basketball. They played baseball. They didn't play football. They played soccer. Katie played I did all of that. Loaded. But I did it. I went. And still today, I got them into dirt bikes, riding dirt bikes. And, they would fall asleep taking the boys to Hollister, and they fall asleep in the truck. And I see them back there in the Suburban sleeping. And I'd get out a little pipe, roll down the window, take a little hit. I was still, there was times that I was still using. And I was the Cub Scout leader that got everybody up and together at breakfast and then went back in the tent real quick and did a blast. And then went out and ran the day.
Right.
what the hell?
I could relate.
But I did it.
Right.
I was there for them. And they remember that today. My sons will say something and I'll be like, whoa, they remember that. And Tammy's like, yes, they remember that. You know, so that's my life and how I've changed. And recovery is what changed me.
Right.
And Tammy changed me. You know, Philip changed me. Writing on the steps. Getting into service. Doing service, when it took me those 3 years to do that 4-step, being in service saved me. There was no way I was coming to Saturday Night Live and standing up there and saying, I relapsed, I only got 1 day clean. I can't be the secretary of this meeting. Or go to the men's meeting, you know, and see all of these people that I knew that at the time had 10, 12, 11, you know, all these years that these guys that I've gotten to know. And that used to come and pick us up and take us to meetings, you know. And there was no way I was going to go back to there and say I used. So being in service, but then maybe that was just me. Because I know people that are in service that do shit and come back and say it and have the balls to come back and do it and say it. I knew I didn't have that, okay, so I didn't go use. And service saved me. You know, for a minute there, it's a service-based recovery.
Yeah.
And then it started to turn. I processed the 4-step, bam, 5th step, 6 steps, 6th step. Whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I got defects? I don't have no defects. Me and Philip laughed for 10 minutes, you know.
And I think the similarities between us are huge, right? And that's the amazing thing about, like, the recovery, you know, the 12-step process, right, is it states how many times our own personal program, right? And I think for some people it's so overwhelming when they walk in because a lot of us carry this huge ego where you got to do it this way, right? So for it to work,
right.
But how many times does it say your own personal program?
It does, and you got to adapt it. And the men's meeting is the meeting that really saved my life, okay? By people with years saying, if you want to have, that would drive up in brand new Chevy trucks, would drive up on their Harleys, would, you know, drive up in a nice car, a Corvette or something, and would then in the meeting would say, if you want what I have, then you got to do what I did. And I wrote on the steps, I got a sponsor, I got in service, and I never put anything in my hand, and I didn't get loaded.
Right.
And that was it. And it's like, okay. And you hear that, you know, and then you hear people that talk about suggestions. Try them. If it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. You know, answer a question every day. If that doesn't work for you, then don't do it. Answer a question every other day. Answer 2 or 3 questions every 3rd day. You know, there's a guy out there that one of his things is, well, let step work sit. And sit and sit and sit. And then all of a sudden we'll start writing, and he'll write on 3 questions every day until he's done with like 2 or 3 steps and has gone through and processed them with the sponsor. And he's got 22, 24 years clean.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and those are things that I see that hit me, that it's like, and then you hear people's stories. You know, when my first week, the treatment center took us to Love and Hugs, which was at Trask, and it was an outside meeting that night, and it was a speaker meeting. It was the last Wednesday of the month, and it was a speaker meeting. And she talked about getting hit, her dad hitting her, and being abusive, and just, you know, horrible life. And I was like, whoa, okay. That hit me. You know, and all of this is going on at the treatment center. I'm resisting, and my case manager is like, brother, what are you doing? He wore glasses, and he had a different kind of a voice, and he'd look over the top of the glasses, and he'd tilt his head, and he'd say, brother, what are you doing? And, you know, all of that was God. You know, you talk about how you have a spiritual awakening as you hit your 12th step and you realize things, but there are spiritual moments that happen throughout our recovery. And I got in the treatment center one night. It's hot. It's August, and we were watching TV, and we had a little TV like this, okay, that had antennas on it, and you got up to turn the channel, okay, and we're watching TV, and it's hot, and I go outside and I laid down on the sidewalk where we smoked at and had a cigarette. I was looking up at the stars, and it was like the obsession to use, to want more drugs was lifted. It was just like, wow, what the hell was that? I had several of those things like that happen there, about trusting people. We did a trust thing there, and I learned about trusting people, because who do you trust?
Yeah.
Don't trust anybody.
Well, the people that you love the most let you down.
Right. Well, my brothers came to the treatment center for family group, and we're all out in the parking lot, and they yelled, "Group!" And my brothers walked over, got in their cars, and drove away. Well, as soon as we get in and we sit down and we go through all the stuff that we had to go through, he turns around and he says, "So, Werner, I see your siblings left. How does that make you feel?" And I was like, I broke down and said, "It makes me feel like shit." To this day, they really still don't acknowledge that. But what I've learned through recovery is that if they don't want to accept me in their life, and they don't want to walk by and say, "Oh, hey, I love you," or anything like that, then that's their loss. Because I've learned through writing in the steps and working traditions and working with people and being around other people that I'm actually okay.
Right.
I'm not an asshole. My brother always called me an asshole. I introduced Tammy to him, and he says, "Why are you going out with this asshole?" And she immediately hated him. Yeah. And so it's that's my life, and here I am today, 18 years, 11 months, and 6 days clean, cancer free for the last 17 years, 18 years. I'm a walking, talking miracle.
Right.
I've had carotid artery surgeries. I've had to have sinus surgery. Who knows? From drugs, snorting so much crank and so much coke, snorting so much brake dust and everything that comes along with being a mechanic, and I still have problems breathing, but, I've had sinus surgery and that helped it, One day I'm at the doctor for an ingrown toenail, and she listens to my heart. Well, we looked at this and cleaned it out. Been watching this one for the last 3 years. Finally, it got 90% blocked, and they cut it open and cleaned it out. And I'd had a knee surgery scheduled. Then this hit, and it all fell together. I was actually able to do them both and not have to pay true deductibles.
Oh, there you go.
I won. God help me, man.
Right.
I won. Yeah. So.
And so, with all these things that recovery's given you, right? What would you tell somebody out there that may be resistant to it, right? That may be out there on the fence. Am I not? Or they're out there struggling. What would you tell somebody?
Remember the last day you used and today. You're clean today. But remember the last day you used. You survived. So you're here for a reason. I don't know what my reason to be here is. I survived drugs. I survived cancer. I've survived carotid arteries. I have survived some shit. So what is my purpose to be here? You talk about higher powers and God. I call my higher power God at times, but I also call it the Creator. I also just call it my own higher power, my understanding of a higher power, which is caring, loving, and forgiving. Okay, I grew up Catholic. And if there was a God that I was raised with, then why was my grandfather the way he was? Why wasn't he struck down and burned? And why was my dad the way he was? Why wasn't he struck down and burned? So it's bullshit.
Right.
Okay? And then you read in the basic text. A God, your higher power can be anything. You know, and it could be the group. It could be, just has to be loving, caring, and forgiving. And you have to rely on it. Because there is something out there that is greater than us, that's controlling us. But you survived. Okay? So now find the reason why you survived and make yourself useful. And the only thing that I've ever come up with for myself is to keep the doors of NA open because they were open for me. Somebody did that for me. And that's why you see me still in service today. Perfect. And going to meetings and writing on my steps and getting involved in concept workshops and arguing with people about it and getting involved in traditions workshops and arguing with people about their opinion of it, my opinion, you know, my thoughts on it, and what I read, what I interpreted, and what they read and what they interpreted, and realizing that, oh, maybe it's not all what I interpreted, maybe it's some of what she said, you know. I have grown to get a family here. I have brothers here. I have sisters here. And they're not blood. They're more family to me than my siblings. I hate to say that on a podcast, but it's the truth. You know, my sister moved to Arizona when she was 50 and retired. I said, why are you moving to Arizona? She said, I'm tired of taking care of everybody. And it hurt, but I understood it because she took care of me. You know, so there was times that she took care of me. If you ask me, she still resents that my mom dropped me in her lap when she was 12 years old, and that there's still something there. My mom's birthday was the other day, and that was the first time on my mom's birthday that I didn't call any of them. I have my mom's ashes here in my office. I went in there and talked to her, and said I'm not calling them because they just don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and so I didn't. Here's one for you. My sister rented a house in Vancouver Island. On her way from Arizona to Vancouver Island, she stops here in Modesto and stays with Brother Rick. We all go out to dinner. And then I hear that brothers and sister-in-laws are invited for 2 weeks up to Vancouver. And then the last 2 weeks, her son and some other friends are coming up. Never once did she say, maybe you and Tammy should come up. Seriously. I've had people in NA say, hey, are you going to come down and camp with us? Are you going to go do this? Are you going to go do this with us? Are you going to come do this with us? You know, I got family here.
Yeah.
And I've made that choice. And I learned, like I started to say, I learned in recovery that if they don't want to accept me, and that's okay. That's their loss. Because I'm not a bad person. You know, I have my opinions, but I'm not a bad person. Yeah. I mean well for everybody. I want everybody to get what I got. I got a new life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've been able to stay on a job for over 18 years. Who'd have ever thought? Right. A guy that changed jobs every 2.5 years to stay, and then stayed on a job for 8 years, and then used and lost that job, and then had a business that lasted 18 months and used and lost it, and now to be able to stay on a job for over 18 years.
And it sounds like you're okay with that today because you know your worth.
I do. I am. Right. And I know what I am at the job. I know my worth at the job. And I know I can do the job. You know, I mean, yeah. I know, I mean, just recently, yesterday, I had a guy send me a video of a truck that was worked on. And all kinds of stuff that just wasn't bolted back together. And the truck was let go, and it was towed in the next day. And he says, they terminated this guy. And I said, well, I would hope so. And he said, okay, so I'm not going to file a grievance. You know, and this was the guy from the union. And it's like, no, don't file a grievance. You can't fight for this guy. This is the kind of a guy that people look at unions and say, yeah, fucking unions are no good because they just take, you know, they just keep everybody that's not worth a shit. No, you got to let that guy go. Yeah. He's going to make all of us look bad. You got to let him go. And and I'm at that there. You know, I'm there. You know, I'm the recording secretary for my local lodge. I've been to, gotten to go to union conventions, you know, which is, you know, 1,800 people. You know, met the president of my union, the international, you know. I've been sent to leadership classes because I've showed that I care, you know, that I can be something, that I can, yeah. I've learned today that I am okay and that I have worth, yes.
Awesome. Well, I think we hit it, Werner.
We hit it.
I think so.
I talked a lot, though. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Did you get all of your questions that you wanted to ask in?
Well, you know what? The good thing is sometimes I don't have to ask that much.
Okay.
You told your story.
Okay, well, real quick, I've done the 12 steps, I've done the 12 traditions, and I've worked on the 12 concepts, okay? And I'm currently back on my steps again, and I'm doing a version this time that went around the fellowship as do them in a week. You do it, yeah, it's a workshop. You do a step a week. And, you know, and I'm doing that and with Philip, and because I felt I took too long on my first set and I didn't get enough to practice enough of the spiritual principles enough during the time. And so that's what I'm doing now.
Nice. Well, the last thing is you owe me a hug.
Yeah. I love you, brother.
I love you too, Werner.
Right on,
Thank you, man. Thank you.